Hey everyone, Ranger William here from the Overmountain Victory National Historic Trail. I happen to be bringing you this new program, a multi-part series entitled Rogues, Banditti, and Crackers, the Southern Backcountry in the American Revolution. Now, the reason we're talking about this, the Battle of Kings Mountain on October 7th, 1780, it has been called by, I saw one historian call it the crown jewel of the partisan war. I love it. The partisan war is the phase of the Southern campaign of the American Revolution that was epitomized by raids and small skirmishes outside of anything that would really be called a battle by a general. But what these raids did, it just slowly ate away. It kind of bled the British Army when they tried to occupy Georgia and the Carolinas, North and South Carolina. Now, for example, this historian said that in the summer of 1780 alone, there's about 500 casualties inflicted on the British Army with their various outposts and garrisons and escorts, not in any battle, but by these small groups of backcountry fighters, these what some British officers refer to as rogues, banditti, and crackers. Now, the casualties listed here, that's just those who are killed, wounded, or captured during these raids. But what's not counted are the thousands more casualties that happen when these backcountry people fight each other, or when they fight against Native American nations, either allied with the British or the Patriots. It's also not counting the hundreds of British soldiers who are going to be needed to further garrison these outposts, further guard these supply wagons and escort them because of the presence of these backcountry fighters. Now, what are the British going to do about these guys, about this problem? They're going to try a variety of approaches, everything from leniency and full pardons to scorched earth and executions. But none of them were really successful. Patrick Ferguson, Bannister Tarleton, James Weems, none of them could really stop all of these small little resistance fighters that were popping up everywhere. Because what's going on, who are these people they're fighting? They have been fighting for years, not only fighting for their homes, but fighting among their homes. These backcountry people were fighting each other. Even before the war, they were in a very hard lifestyle of conflict and competition. Even in peacetime. So the British officers, again, they call these people unprincipled banditti. One of my favorites is that heathen race known by the name of crackers, and they refer to their tactics as using horses, fast horses, using accurate rifles and ambushes, these kind of hit and run tactics. Now, that's what the British thought about them. But what do we think about these people, these same groups? It's interesting because they have kind of formed them in their distinctive culture. They have a place in our national history that kind of borders almost on national pride. Just one example of how they've kind of been highlighted in our national memory. I'm going to read you this quote. I want to see if you can guess where it comes from. Here we go. "I'm fresh from the backwoods. I'm half horse, half alligator, and a little attached to a snapping turtle. I've got the fastest horse, the prettiest sister, the surest rifle, and the ugliest dog." Now, who said that? Originally it comes from Colonel Nimrod Wildfire's play The Lion of the West in 1831 about the life of David Crockett, but it's probably most famous to a lot of us with Fess Parker and Walt Disney's Davy Crockett, the King of the Wild Frontier in 1955. But that's just an example of how this culture, these people have remained in our memory. But that's just an example. How did these kinds of people, who were they really? Where did they come from? Why were they there on the backcountry? And how did they influence the American Revolution? How did these groups of rogues, banditti, and crackers keep the British from reconquering the South? So let's dive into episode 1. Here we go. Now, the good news and bad news about being British. We are talking about the 13 American colonies in the British Empire. Why is it good to be British? Let's talk about these guys here across the top, the 3 big portraits of the King Georges. We're going to focus on these 3 here. You're looking at the Hanoverian monarchs. We're going to focus on the 18th century here, so 1714 to the Revolution in the 1770s. It's under the reign of these guys, George I, his son George II, and his grandson George III, Britain becomes one of the most unrestricted and freest empires on the planet. But Ranger Will, we had a revolution about it. Yes, we did. And this is why people were so confused and surprised that this happened. Compared to other empires, there are more rights and liberties in the British Empire than anywhere else. And what are some of those? Let's talk about it's a constitutional monarchy. That means there is representation in Parliament. The whole no taxation without representation, that's because the American colonies did not have a seat in Parliament, even though Britain offered them a seat after 1778, but side note there. So you're looking at a bicameral legislature, bicameral parliament, the House of Lords, which is inherited seats from the landed aristocracy, and then the House of Commons, elected by the people. And that is going to balance out the will, the decisions of the king. So you don't see that in other empires, in France and Spain, in the German states, no Germany quite yet. You don't have this level of representation and control limit of the government. Now also you're going to have the rising middle class, this creation of people who are able to put some money aside, get some pocket change saved up, and buy luxury goods, non-essential things. It's no longer just peasants going hand to mouth all the time. People are able to buy nicer stuff. They're able to use this global economy, this market all around the British Empire. They're able to be specialized shopkeepers, manufacturers, mechanics they were called, and they're able to kind of work their way up that social ladder. Because see, there is no credit score in the 18th century. If you want to be treated like you are wealthier, if you want to get better loans, better deals, better business, you have to look and act the part. And if you can look and act the part, you're going to be able to get that stuff. However, if you can't, then of course the opposite happens. But the ability to change your social station is happening in the British Empire during this time under the reign of these guys here. What else do you see happening? You see religious protections. Now, yes, the Anglican Church is still the official Church of England, and the king is the head, but you have Protestant protections. The Act of Toleration in 1689 really kind of nailed down and solidified something that had been supported by even back to Elizabeth I, centuries before. So you have Britain becomes a refuge for other Protestants. You're looking at the French Huguenots fleeing the Catholic Empire there. You're looking at German Lutherans fleeing the warring German states and the Holy Roman Empire. It becomes a place of toleration of Protestants and the Presbyterians. So you have that going on as well. Now, one other side note here, you have the small picture kind of set here in the middle between George II and George III. It's Prince Frederick. This is George II's son. So excuse me. So I have him in here because you see this rising freedom of speech. You see Prince Frederick did not get along well with his father, George II, actively spoke out against him, and so you could support the prince in speaking against the king, or support the king and speak against the prince. This idea of the loyal opposition, this idea of you can speak against part of government and not be a traitor, not be anti-government. This is going to be some of those liberties and rights that are going to be championed by different people in Parliament. William Pitt, Edmund Burke, John Wilkes, that's the other name, Edmund Burke and John Wilkes. So this is going to be a big deal. You've got a limited government, you've got rising middle class and social mobility, you have some religious protections, and you've got a pretty open freedom of speech. So that's why it's good to be British. But here's what's kind of going wrong with this at the same time. If you are a poor farmer, if you are a low-class, working-class farmer, there's a lot of things happening that are going to really mess up your life. One of those big things is going to be the Enclosure Acts. Let me remove my picture here. You can see this image here in the bottom corner of some surveyors from the National Library of Ireland. What you see happening in this time is you have an increasing number of towns, communities, who are going to be fencing off public land. It used to be there were these public pastures, public fields that you can use. They all get worked together by everybody. And this is maybe what you needed to keep your farm above water, to make a little bit of side money, a little bit of a profit. you're starting to lose those. You're seeing a growing woolen industry, a wool industry, which needs large sheep herds, which need large pastures. So you're going to see this being closed off, fenced off, put over for the sheep. Also, these landed estates being created, so you're losing those opportunities. Over 5,200 different Enclosure Acts are passed in Britain between 1604 as late as 1914. Those are still being passed. So you see that going on. But at the same time, something else that you have the Hanoverians, the Georges doing, is this creation of the National Bank of England. You see this idea of a national debt, where it's the people's money, it's the people paying taxes to the government, and the government then doing these public works and these social improvements, these projects. It's not just funded by a certain aristocrat or a baron or a duke or a prince, like you see in France, for example, the French Empire at this time. It's going to be some nobleman, the king himself, who is personally funding these projects. So the king is going to be needing the money, not necessarily the French government. So just a different approach there. But this national debt has to be paid in specie, in coin. You can't pay this in a chicken like if you were just paying a landlord, if you were a tenant farmer, paying them in crops. So it's going to be hard on your poor farmers. They're losing their fields, their public fields, the same time that they have an increasing responsibility to pay these taxes. That's going to really put them in a bind. Now, so you have all the good reasons to be British, but if you can't stay in Britain, you're going to go to the American colonies. And one big reason, well, big way that you see this happen, if you can't afford transportation, can't pay for your voyage over, you're going to indenture yourself. You're going to say, I will be a servant, usually 7 to 11 years, and you're going to sign that contract usually with the ship's captain. And when you get to the New World, you reach port, he's going to sell that contract to somebody, and you're going to work for them 7 to 11 years, get land, get some clothes, get some training. You're going to, it's not quite as good as an apprenticeship, but you're going to get a little bit of an opportunity. And it's estimated that about 200,000 indentured servants come to the American colonies by the 1770s, but this is not across the board. You see this really climb up. This high point is going to be in the late 17th century, and it's going to slowly taper off. So by the time of the 1770s, only 2 to 3% of your colonial workforce are indentured servants. They have been largely replaced by enslaved Africans and African Americans. The people who were buying the contracts of these servants have realized, well, it's better for me economically if I just own a person rather than just have them work for me, own them for a short period of time. So by the time of the American Revolution, you're going to see about 500,000 enslaved Africans and African Americans being in the 13 American colonies. Now, usually when we're talking about the colonies in this program, we just mean the 13 American colonies who joined the rebellion. We're not going to be talking about Florida and Canada, the Caribbean, the 26 total British North American colonies, just looking at half of those, the 13 rebellious half. Now, another thing you have going on at the same time is the Troubles in Ireland. This is, going back to the 15th century, what you're seeing is this kind of a creation of a new ethnic group, the Scot-Irish. Also, we're seeing referred to in documents as Ulster Scots or Scotch-Irish. I've seen that as well. They are ethnically Scottish or North British, Northern England. They are Protestants, they're Presbyterians, and they had been, generations back, recruited, transported, kind of established in Ireland to help the English combat the native Catholic Irish who lived there. Try to be a Protestant presence, a rough buffer between the English and the Irish. So by the mid-18th century, this kind of a hybrid culture has emerged. The Scot-Irish, they're very tough. They've been fighting it out with Irish Catholics. You see a lot of kind of domestic terrorism even back into the 18th century. British sentries being jumped in alleyways and their Achilles tendons being cut. So you see a lot of danger, a lot of violence, and this group is going to be especially hard hit by the economic things, the Enclosure Acts, the national debt. But on top of all that, they're in Ireland. So that means if they want to send some of their product things like the woolen industry, linen industry, glass, beer, paper, hats. If they're making things and want to get that into the rest of the British economy, they're going to have a heavy tariff to pay, an export tax. They are paying this tariff because Parliament wants to protect those same manufacturers that are in England and the rest of Britain. So they're going to put heavy tariffs on the Irish industries. So you're looking at an even heavier restriction there. A lot of these folks say, you know what, there's a better chance across the ocean. So by the time of the American Revolution, it's estimated about 250,000 Scot-Irish have made that trip across. That's going to be roughly about 10% of your population of the colonies by the time of the American Revolution. And now this is going to be one of the main groups we follow because of their immigration really picks up in the 1730s and 40s. So you're seeing a window there of only about 30, 40 years when this 250,000 migration is happening. They're going to be on the frontier, on the edges. We're going to follow them into the rest of this program. And we're going to follow them where? Philadelphia. We're going across the Atlantic, coming into Pennsylvania there. Why Philadelphia? Why are we ending up here in this colony of all the other ones? There's reasons. Now, this many people looking for opportunity, they're not just going to jump in and hope for the best, but they're going to be sending out, scouts. They send their cousins, their brother-in-law, somebody to go scope it out, see what kind of opportunities you have, and report back. And then everyone is going to make this move. And why do they like Pennsylvania? It's Quaker, it's big, and they're pacifists. That's kind of to summarize it. They look at the other colonies like New England. It's very Puritan. The culture there does not really mesh well with the Scot-Irish Presbyterians, who are kind of rough. So not a great fit there. New York has these land barons who own millions of acres, and sure, you can want to be a tenant farmer for them, but no, I've been there, done that. They want their own farms. Now, the Virginia South, you're going to see a lot of plantations, a lot of slave economies down there. So there's not a lot of land or opportunity for these poor farmers to buy land of their own when they're coming into the coastal ports. So Philadelphia is going to be the big one. It's a Quaker colony, Quaker run, so you're going to see them very accepting of the Presbyterians and the Protestants. You're going to see it being a very big colony, so there's lots of land, lots of opportunity for these farmers to buy and own their own land. And then also they're pacifists. Quakers are pacifist. So that means there is no mandatory militia service. That's something that you're going to see in all the other colonies, but not Pennsylvania. At least not when this is happening in the 1730s and 40s, this migration is happening. So what does that mean is that this is a great opportunity with very little danger, and they're going to really jump in here. Now, you don't see it just being the Irish. This is not just a uniquely Scot-Irish population, but we're kind of right alongside them doing a similar migration. You have Germans coming to Pennsylvania. And there is no Germany yet. They're not unified yet. It's going to be a number of different German states, but the same reasons you saw people leaving Britain. You saw religious persecution, especially by the Holy Roman Empire, if you were a German Lutheran or some of the many different denominations. But also you see these different little German states, Hesse-Kassel, Hesse-Hanau, Brunswick, Hanover, Prussia. There's almost constant warfare going on. If not between those states, those princes are renting their armies out to other people who are fighting. This is what you see happen with the Hessians in the American Revolution. These are not mercenaries who are choosing to come and fight because they're being paid. They are armies being sent by their prince because their prince is being paid, even if those guys get wounded and killed, especially if they get wounded and killed. So they don't want to live there. They don't want to be part of this system. They're immigrating and they're coming to Pennsylvania. In fact, there are so many Germans that you have some really interesting observations made by Dr. Benjamin Franklin, Dr. Benjamin Rush. They are noting the heavy German population and the presence in the culture, and they're noticing the difference between the farms. You have all these Irish farms coming in and German farms coming in, and they say it's really fascinating how different they approach getting settled. They note how the Germans are there for the long haul. They are building a dynasty. They are getting stone homes, stone barns, stone walls. One, I think it's Benjamin Rush, who talks about they are setting out orchards that they may never actually bear fruit in that farmer's lifetime, but he knows his kids and grandkids will be able to get fruit from those trees. They're starting stone barns that they won't even get to finish before they die, but their kids can finish them and their grandkids can use them. They're building something. Whereas the Irish are barely getting crops in the ground. They're using wooden, just log structures, and then they're moving on somewhere else. They keep bouncing around. So it's interesting, even like the temperament. Dr. Benjamin Rush elaborates about how different the Irish personalities and the temperaments are compared to the Germans. But one way that you see these kind of cultures blend is going to be in the American log cabin. So let me grab a laser pointer here and let's talk about some of this here at the bottom. Far left here, it's not sure, it's kind of argued who the first ones were to bring the log cabin, the log home design into the American colonies. Some say the Danes, some say the Swedes, but it's kind of part of this culture of dealing with harsh winters that you're going to use these logs, you're going to stack them up. Some homes even would use the logs vertically stacked, and they're going to have a central chimney, sometimes with a two-sided fireplace or just an open hearth on the floor with a little smoke hole in the roof, smaller windows, try to keep that heat trapped inside. And then you have the more Irish style here over. And this is going to be actually an Irish cottage up at the Frontier Culture Museum of Virginia in Stanton, Virginia. And you notice you got the chimneys on the ends. You have not log construction, but stone or earth with plaster. You're going to have a front and a back door, trying to get that ventilation, that air circulation moving through. These two cultures blend. And what you end up with is this third picture of the American log cabin. It's going to be stacked log construction. It's a German thing. You're going to have this side chimney, an Irish thing. You're going to have kind of smaller windows trying to control the heat. That's going to be a German thing. But you're going to have a front and back door, so you do have some ventilation when you need it. It's an Irish thing. So these have blended together to make this unique item. Now, as these people are pushing west, building these cabins, getting established, the governor of the colony, the different governors, they are going to try to control where they go. It's their job to keep the peace, it's their job to keep people safe, and that means keeping this growing wave of farmers away from the Native American nations in the west, keep them from infringing further and further onto native land. So they're going to say, well, I can just say, don't go there. I won't issue a land grant. I won't approve their request to live there. But then the governors come to realize these people don't care. They don't care if they have paperwork. They don't care if they're illegal squatters. They'll live there anyway. And what starts to happen is what they see over the years, if they just wait long enough as illegal squatters, there will be another land sale. There will be another land cession, another treaty, and that border is going to get pushed further west. So if you go somewhere and you live illegally as a squatter, just wait it out. That line is going to catch up to you, and you can then apply for legal ownership of that property. You can already have a cabin built. You can already have crops in the ground, a corn claim, as I've seen it referred to in some places. And this is going to set an extremely dangerous precedent, that if they can just wait it out, they will get the chance to legally own that land eventually. Now, not only do you have farmers pushing out here, but you do have speculators. What that means, who these people are, they are usually very wealthy individuals or even groups of individuals, like forming a company together, and they are going to buy thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of acres ahead of where the frontier is kind of really being settled, with the hope of buying it up, chopping it, selling, subdividing, and selling it at a profit to this wave of land-hungry farmers that are coming in behind them. You see some farmers do this themselves. They'll buy a bigger piece than they need, get a big land grant, and then resell it and at a profit. Because in supply and demand, the more settled an area is, the more valuable that land is. So you see these speculators wanting to move in and do this on a massive scale. You can still see this today. You're driving down the road and one day it's just in the middle of nowhere in a farmer's field. The next time you go through there, it's been bought up. It's being constructed into condos and townhomes because they know that urban growth, that urban sprawl, that's going to be where people want to live. So they're getting in ahead and they're buying and making those homes. So same kind of idea. Get in first, buy cheap, sell high, make a profit. So land speculators are jumping in there trying to provide for these farmers. And these farmers are always looking for the next big opportunity. They want to see, okay, what's next? Maybe I can sell what I have, make a little bit of money, move further down the frontier, try to catch up with where the land is available, be some of the first people into the new frontier settlements and get a bigger piece of land, a better farm, a better location. That's going to drive these people further and further west, but they are going to be guided by terrain. Again, they're farmers. They're looking for good farmland, so they're following the valleys. And what they're going to run into, the Cumberland Valley west of Philadelphia is going to feed down into the Shenandoah Valley, which is where we're going to catch them next time. That's it for episode 1 of Rogues, Banditti, and Crackers. We're looking at the backcountry people. So far in episode 1 here, we've covered where are they coming from, why are they leaving Britain or leaving Ireland, and they're coming into Pennsylvania, to Philadelphia, and they're pushing west and about to start pushing south. So catch up with us with episode 2. We're going to get into Virginia and keep on heading south. But I hope you enjoyed. This has been Ranger William from the Overmountain Victory National Historic Trail. Thanks for watching.